Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and today I want to talk to you all about the new Azerite traits and changes that have been data mined for 8.1 for Warlocks so far. Some classes have a few more traits data mined than we have so far, so I expect to see a few more announced in the near future. I do want to mention that these traits are still only on PTR, and with 8.1 being a decent bit of launch, they could very easily see a bit more tuning and changes. If you're interested in acquiring any of the weak auras you see here, I'll have a link to my Twitch and Discord in the description below, where you can find them both. The first trait that I want to talk about is called Chaos Shards. It was data mined about a week ago, and it increases incinerates damage by a certain amount based off of item level, and when you fill up a soul shard, you have a 5% chance to generate an additional soul shard over 2 seconds. Now, from just looking at this trait when it was spoiled, I had a few questions. The first was, is there any kind of internal cooldown on how often the shard proc can occur? And the second was, does it actually affect Fire and Brimstone's damage? Now, from what I can tell from testing on PTR, there does not appear to be any kind of internal cooldown present at the moment, and if there is, it seems to be less than 15 seconds. The fact that it's only a 5% chance to generate a soul shard, however, means that it won't be occurring too often, but RNG is RNG, and there will be times where you'll get some pretty crazy procs close to one another. It is worth mentioning that, like most other Azerite traits, the damage bonus does stack if you're running more than one piece, just like Sudden Onset does for Affliction, but the 5% chance stays the same and does not increase to 10 or 15% with 2 or 3 pieces equipped. Now, from the brief testing I actually conducted with Fire and Brimstone, I can say that it does indeed currently increase your damage to the main target as well as the surrounding targets with the talent selected. Due to the fact that Cataclysm is a single target DPS gain, and is a very strong AoE based ability in general, I still think the Cataclysm will most likely be the go-to choice in said row, but as I mentioned, a lot can change over the next few weeks on PTR. If we see an actual change to Cataclysm, which I think there's actually a decent possibility of happening, having this affect Fire and Brimstone could be much more relevant on launch. The one change I would like to make to this trait, however, is to change the actual Char Generation to 4 or 5 seconds instead of 2. When you have your Infernal active, or you have multiple immolates rolling on a few targets, you're typically sitting around 4 shards with the potential to actually cap at times for a second or 2. The same can be said when setting up for a Havoc window on certain encounters or trash packs. The fact that it generates an entire shard over 2 seconds means that it will promote gameplay where you really have to be aware of where you're sitting shard-wise, heading into Havocs, or when you summon your Infernal, even more so than now. I will say that it is better than having it instantly generate a soul shard, as that means you could potentially lose an entire shard versus a quarter or a half of one at times, but I think we would benefit much more from having the duration increased by at least 1 second. The second trait that I want to talk about, and the one that I am most excited about, is easily Baleful Invocation. Demonology is already a blast to play in Mythic Plus, and this trait has the potential to be very strong in a wide array of scenarios. It states that your Demonic Tyrant deals a certain amount of additional damage for its Demon Fire ability based off of item level, and summoning your Demonic Tyrant instantly generates 5 soul shards. This trait is going to be very strong in Mythic Plus for setting out some huge implosions, as well as burst damage on bosses or priority targets. In a raid setting, this trait has a great deal of potential depending on what spec is the frontrunner in 8.1, as it can provide a great deal of burst damage in your opener, or even be held a bit for a priority ad spawn or a specific part of a fight that requires a bit of extra DPS. It is worth mentioning that having 2 traits does double the additional damage that your Demonic Tyrant deals with his Demon Fire ability, and the best part is that, unlike Chaos Shards, there's no actual RNG tied into this trait. Demonology has suffered at times from not having a lot of great Demo-specific Azerite traits that were good in multiple scenarios. Even now, outside of Supreme Commander, your best bet for a trait that's strong in both Mythic Plus and raids is based around main and secondary stat procs. Baleful Invocation, I believe, is the strongest trait so far that we've seen in 8.1 across all 3 specs, and depending on spec tuning, could easily help push Demonology into the spotlight. The third trait that I want to talk about briefly is not technically a new trait, but one that has been changed a bit from its original state. Inevitable Demise received some changes a few days ago, changing it from generating stacks by a corruption to now agony, and it also had its maximum stack count reduced to 50. It did receive a minor damage bonus buff per stack to help compensate for these changes, however. This means it is both a nerf and a buff in a sense to Inevitable Demise. In Mythic Plus, you're no longer able to cast Seed of Corruption to spread the dot that stacks ID anymore. making maintaining your agonies on targets even more important than before. This also means that it will take a little bit longer to actually ramp up, meaning that it has lost a decent bit of value in Mythic Plus with these changes. I do think that it can and will be used in certain scenarios at times, but saving 100 stacks for a boss opener and doing insane burst damage is not going to be nearly as much of a thing as it was before. From a single target perspective, however, it is a bit of a buff as I mentioned before. You will have to dump your drain life at 50 stacks instead of 100, but the minor damage buff it received does help with its single target sustained damage. In multi-target raid encounters, it will still be a relatively strong choice as well, as long as you can maintain your agonies and not cap at 50 stacks for too long. The change also does mean that there won't be any absolute corruption abuse with ID like there was in Old Deer and even still is in Mythic Plus at times. The final trait that I wanted to cover briefly is a minor defensive trait that can be seen across multiple pieces of Azerite gear. Terror of the Mind states that you steal a certain amount of life based off of item level every 1 second from your targets affected by your fear spell. Even though the trait says specifically targets, you can only have one actual fear active at a time. Also, when I read and hear that the effect steals life every 1 second from the target, I naturally assume that it will be healing me every 1 second. But that's not the way it's currently functioning on PTR. As you can see here, the buff states that it actually currently provides a shield for you and your pet every 1 second. I did look to confirm this in logs as well as in the in-game combat log, and it does appear to be providing a minor shield and not any type of actual healing at the moment. I'm not sure which form of the trait is the intended version, but I'm leaning more towards the actual shield version of it, as it would follow suit with most of the other defensive traits in the row and just make a bit more sense. If we still had the glyph that held your feared target in place while under the effect of fear, I think it might be a bit more viable, but at this point it's not too impressive. Thanks for watching guys, and I hope this gave you all a better look at the new Warlock Azerite traits that have currently been discovered on PTR. I'm sure that more traits and tuning will be coming soon, so if you want to see that and help support the channel, smash those like, share, and subscribe buttons as your support really helps. Let me know what you think of the new traits in the comments below, or if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks so much guys, and I'll see you on Azeroth. Peace. Beware.